In this video, I'll show you what I learned when I rented a trencher to try and install some irrigation lines. And unfortunately, the rocky soil defeated me here, but I'll show you what I learned nonetheless. In case you're new here, my name is Dan and I love to DIY things. And a couple of years ago, my mom and I bought this old 1949 Spartan Manor camper trailer and have been fixing it up ever since. And this is what we hope to bring to the land, where we can then use it as a home base to eventually build a house. So let's get back to the trencher, which I optimistically thought was going to allow me to complete all this irrigation pipe work in a single day. But as you'll see, it didn't work out that way. Today I was hoping that we'd be able to dig down to the base of this incoming water line and then join it inside this irrigation kind of junction box to our new line that goes to the rest of the property.
And the idea is to dig a trench down either side of the property with one joining them in the middle so we can have water supply for plants throughout the property. And I'll give more detail in a later video, but this is the plastic tubing and the fittings that I bought to provide irrigation on the land. Fortunately, the rental of this trencher came with these ramps, which made it quite easy to unload this from the back of my truck. And this trencher is really heavy, and it's actually the smallest trencher they had available. And since this is the first time I've ever used one of these things, the first job is to figure out how to start and stop it. To start it up, there's an on-off switch at the handle, another one on the engine, two levers here, one of which I know is called the choke, and the throttle, which I move all the way back to minimum. And with one pull of start cord, it fired right up. And look at this thing go. And this is just its idle speed. So with it running, I push both of these levers forward and increase the throttle towards max. Now you can see it's humming along pretty quickly. And as this sticker warns, don't get your limbs anywhere near this thing. You can stop it quickly from here or from the switch by the handle. Then I reset these levers and the throttle back to their start positions. There's a lever for the throttle on the handle, but I found this one to be quite stiff and it is easier to use the one on the engine itself. In order to set the digging depth of this trencher, you first have to lean it back, pull this handle towards you, and then you can place it into any one of these three notches to select your depth. Here it is at maximum depth, which is supposed to be about 18 inches. And of course, do the opposite procedure to bring it back to the neutral position. So I was pretty excited to get this going, and I optimistically set the trenching depth to its maximum. And it seems to get off to a pretty good start, but I'm not actually using this correctly. And you can see it's quite a struggle for me to pull this backwards. So I reduced it to its shallowest setting and dragged it across the property. Again, I'm not using this 100% correctly yet.
All right, that was a lot of work, and I only put it down to the first setting for the depth because it's hitting so many rocks. So what I think we're gonna have to do is just do one pass at that depth, take out the rocks that we can see, do a second pass, take out the rocks, do a third pass until we get to the depth that we want. With the rocks out of the way, I'm gonna turn this thing around, fire it up, and try and run it through at the second depth setting. As you can see, I'm still trying to pull this thing straight backwards, which is not the right technique. And here I'm starting to use the right technique, but right about then I encounter my first problem with rocks jamming the machine. So here I was a little bit confused as to what happened and tried adjusting the throttle, but really I just needed to shut it down immediately. And with both switches off, I went in for a closer look. All right, just when I started to feel the hang of it, and make sure that this is off before you're doing anything. Look, a rock got jammed in there.
I used a hammer to dislodge that rock, but you'll see I find an easier way that worked most of the time to do this later.
The offending rock. So my first pass with this, I wasn't actually following the directions that are right there on a sticker on the machine, where you're supposed to lift it up, pull it back, let it down. Lift it up, pull it back, and let it down. And I was just trying to drag it across, which gave horrible results. And now I can see as I do that it makes a big difference. So here's the depth where I was just trying to pull it back, and then it takes a big jump down here where I was actually following the instructions. And you can also see it reflected in the amount of dirt that was coming out. because there's nothing where I was doing it incorrectly, and then it becomes quite a pile where I was doing it correctly.
So here's that technique illustrated a little more clearly. Of course, start it up as usual, get it up to speed, set the depth, and then drop it down. And of course, it doesn't move this dirt instantly, so don't be afraid to let it sit there for several seconds as it reaches this depth in that one position. So here you can see I'm tilting it up before pulling it back, and then letting it down again. Then lift it up, pull it back, and drop it down again.
It's a really cool machine. So this tears up the dirt, of course, and brings it back up, where that auger then pushes it out to the side. And another rock jammed it up in the exact same spot. Here's a quick tool tip. Don't lean down behind this machine. I was about to pull it back and saw a small rock in the way and leaned down to move it. And that's when the machine hit another rock. The handle jumped back and bopped me right on the head. And I'm actually bleeding a little bit. Whoops. So please don't do that. Some big ones in here. As soon as you hear it get jammed like that, just shut it off with that switch. And for safety, I turned this one off as well. And then I look to see where the rocks are. And sometimes you can just move it with this wheel, with this auger. Easier said than done. There we go. And it seems like it's free again. What's cool about this is that it has a belt drive, so if it does get jammed like that, it doesn't destroy the engine. The belt just slips. All right, so something else I discovered while trying to maneuver this thing around is that when it's on the neutral depth, when it's just horizontal, the blade, you can move it forward and backwards. But as soon as you engage this depth control, see, you can't move it forward. There are these little things here that engage on some gears and stop you from moving it forward.
Which of course makes a lot of sense, because otherwise this chain on the trencher will be pulling it forward all the time. So it was at this point in the day that I began to realize the limitations of this trencher in rocky soil. It literally felt like I was having to stop the machine and dislodge a rock every 30 seconds. And then this happened.
All right, so here's a pretty bad failure. The chain came off and actually came off of these rear teeth and was kind of jammed in here with this auger, and I managed to loosen it. And then I took it off this front pulley because that's the smaller groove to fit over than those big teeth. So what I'm gonna try and do is get this back on over there, and then I'll try and get it back over here. But the problem will still remain that I think this chain has stretched a little bit with all the rocks it's hit.
Here you can see me struggling to hold up this heavy machine while simultaneously trying to re-engage this chain.
It's almost back on.
And I just can't get it to pop over that ridge on the outer pulley. And I eventually give up and think I need to look at other options.
Actually, what I think I need to do is loosen off this nut here and find an Allen key so that I can push that whole thing in, just like a chainsaw, and get some slack on this chain so I can loop it back over this pulley and then adjust it back out so that hopefully it doesn't fall off again. All right, well, I managed to get it back on by applying some force with the screwdriver. As I turned the auger by hand, holding it up with my legs, I didn't get it on camera, unfortunately, because I had kind of given up by that point, but it's back on. I think this is still gonna be too loose and it'll probably come off again, but let's give it a try. Otherwise, we have to do a 40-minute round trip into town just to get an Allen key to fit that. Sometimes it's easier to just pull it.
So this actually kept working for a while, and the chain didn't pop off like I thought it might. But of course, rocks kept jamming in the chain.
Well, this is it for today for sure, because the chain finally just broke off. I was just doing a second pass on this beginning of the trench over here, and yeah, the chain finally just had enough. I'm really wondering if this is the right tool for the job, because small rocks get caught in the chains and then the big rocks just stop and it can't get past them, of course. And I'm wondering if I should just get a mini excavator with a small shovel to dig this kind of trench.
And before I started this, I naively thought I could dig all the trenches today and even lay the plastic piping. I was so wrong. I was a little worried about loading this beast back into the truck by myself, but I realized I could park the truck down the hill, which allowed these ramps to be a little less steep, and I was able to push it up without any problem. And since this handle doesn't fold down, this is how I broke the rear window of my canopy. And it's great that these ramps came as part of the rental. I thought it would be an additional fee, but it wasn't. So I was way overly optimistic in how far I'd get with digging these trenches with this machine. And as you can see, I just got a very modest start on the distribution system we want to install. I'd hoped I could get trenches along these red lines.
So if you're looking to dig some trenches on your land, I'd highly recommend that you first dig with a shovel and a pickaxe first to see how rocky your soil is. If it's anything like our soil is, you're not going to get very far with a small trencher like this. Next, I'm going to try renting a mini excavator with a 6-inch wide shovel to see if I can finish this job. So I hope this video has been helpful for you, and if you like videos like this, you might like this one here.